Good afternoon, everyone. It's Miles Clayton here from Agility PR, and I'm very pleased this afternoon to be with Graham Reed, who's a director at Ice Blue Sky. Ice Blue Sky, very interesting marketing business based in the area of demand generation, customer experience, account-based marketing, and all the sort of confluence of marketing and sales. So I think that's a very interesting area by comparison to where we are, where we're slightly more focused on the content side. And what we're going to focus on is looking at the disruption across the PR industry space and what that might mean for potential buyers of marketing services and demand generation services. And just trying to unpick all that and see what is going on. And I'm going to pass over to Graham just to give us a little bit more detail on Ice Blue Sky.
Thanks, Miles. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me on. It's good to chat about these things from time to time. Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Graham. As Miles said, I'm a director at Ice Blue Sky. I go by a rather unusual title. I head up business creation, and that's not only business creation for us, for our clients, because that's obviously what we're there to do in the very much the minutiae of the services we do, but also for us as an agency at the same time. I like sometimes when people ask me what do we do as an agency and they're not too well initiated in the world of sort of ABM or lead or demand gen and things like that. I sometimes say that we're almost like the equivalent of the SAS of marketing, or in some cases the James Bond of marketing. And why I say that is because we have very specific tools. We use very specific channels, and it's how we combine all those tools, all that equipment together to drive the best possible outcome. And what is the outcome? And sometimes people say this to me. They say, "Well, Graham, what are you trying to achieve at Ice Blue Sky?" And I always say that if we can get clients having effective and relevant or early stage sales conversations about meaningful, purposeful transactions, then we're doing our job. That's what we're there to do. What we're not there to do as an agency is close the deal, and we can't obviously possibly do that. But what we do is we work with clients at a very granular level, understanding that messaging, articulating that, making sure we identify the audiences, making sure we understand who the people are that sit within those various audiences, and then it's around the creation of content, and it's around how do we engage with them, how do we effectively get their interest, how do we get them interacting and seeing the value proposition, and then moving that through the journey, through the funnel, and then honing them down from sort of lead and more demand generation down to lead gen, and then maybe into that more middle, lower part of the funnel where we're using account-based marketing and some of those very specialist techniques that we use to go and interact with people. So in a very sort of placid, sort of top level way, that's a little bit about us and what we do, Miles.
No, that's fantastic. And I think that leads into my first question, really, which is what it's a bit of a sort of an agency head type question, really. Bearing in mind what you're talking about there is a much closer collaboration stroke integration that's beginning to go on between sales and marketing. And what opportunities do you think that creates for the agency world, but from both perspectives, perhaps from the traditional PR point of view and the digital marketing agency point of view?
Yeah, sure. I think you touched on a very relevant point there around about that. Well, I always say, a lot of people say sales and marketing alignment. I always call it marketing and sales alignment because I always think marketing comes first. So that alignment is absolutely key. And I would say the best successes around business objectives is when you do have your sales teams and your marketing teams absolutely aligned and in the same room. So understanding what is the objectives, what do the sales departments see in the marketplace, what are the objectives, what are they trying to achieve, but equally so, what are the marketing teams having to work with in relation to what the value proposition is and creating campaigns that what I said earlier about that really engagement side. And then, but more importantly, got to have the buy-in from the sales teams. I think there was some stat saying that the outcome of your campaigns are so much more. Forrester have got a stat. I think it's 30% more successful if you've got that alignment. But it means that there's no break in service, as I would call it. And when I say there's no break in service, is what the left hand knows what the right hand's doing. And so when sales are ultimately engaged with that, what I call that final mile, that final interactive with opportunities, that everything they're talking about is aligned to that messaging that's been created upstream. And I think that's for me, Miles, that's one of the most important things, is making sure you've got that continuity of messaging out into the marketplace. And that touches into PR as well. So you could say sales, marketing, and PR alignment, or
Yes,
if PR is involved in the marketing side. It all depends when it comes in. But there's no point PR doing a job which is almost like a polar opposite, or not really connecting to that value proposition as well, because you want a synergy of communication out there. You don't want something slightly saying something differently to what all the other messages are that are going out into the various buying groups and the people that you're trying to engage with.
absolutely. No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the least successful PR campaigns won, I've executed, have been the ones where the sales guy has decided he's not going to integrate what we're doing in terms of
Mm.
the PR campaign with his sales effort
Mm.
because he wants it to sort of act as a sort of standalone pilot for his own purposes. But of course, actually, what you need to do is put all that good content and material to work to engage the audiences you've clearly identified. And also, the messaging needs to be, fully aligned
Mm.
with a PR campaign with what salespeople are telling you are the buying signals or are the things which customers are looking for
And,
as those pain
and
points.
Miles, now we now live in a world where we're already starting to see now the slight twist and change in content that may be effectively used into various buying groups, because we now know that the diversity of buying groups in the marketplace, there's so many more people involved. And so from a PR perspective, in the extension of that from marketing is to make sure that if you're dealing with ops, if you're dealing with IT, if you're dealing with procurement, whatever the various divisions are, manufacturing side, is that narrative, it just has to be looked at a little bit more carefully, because what you're trying to do is align those key messages, that key narrative across those various buying groups to drive what we call consensus. And that's been something that's been spoken about for quite some time, is to drive consensus across those various people, so that when they come together, they understand the value of the proposition that's being considered relevant to their own requirements, but also as well holistically how that fits into the needs of the other people across the other buying groups as well.
Mm. And from an agency perspective, does that create complexity in terms of who we're talking to? I mean, our decision makers, if you like, in terms of buying of our services, are they different people from what they were just a few years ago, for example, in your view? Or have you been always talking to heads of sales and this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that I think the same people have always been, they're still there.
Mm,
But I still think that sometimes when you're positioning yourself to have to have the C-suite aware of what you do,
mm,
or even the finance department it's seeing what you do, the value proposition. I have this strange view, Mars, that when certainly when we're pitching into organizations, but not only when we're pitching in, but when we're working on behalf of our clients. So if I put myself in the hat of I'm working now for a client, and I have this sort of vision that actually if we've connected with all the right people in that organization, at some point they're all going to have to come together, and they're going to have to come together and make a decision, and or talk about the problem, or talk about maybe that vendor consideration, that part of when they're all together and say, right, okay, we've identified a problem, we understand what the solution is, now we've got to go for a vendor. And I like to think, if that strategy has been deployed in all the right ways, that when they get round the boardroom table, when they get round the meeting room table, somebody might said, oh, has anybody seen ABC? And everybody in the room would have had some sort of interaction with ABC into the varying degrees. So I think the key buyers still exist, but I think the influence now around influencing and peppering information in the wider context, still relevant to the business, I think that's been the change. It's become ever so much more important because you've got wider diversity and bigger numbers in that decision-making process.
Excellent. And do you think that, I mean, maybe this is an unfair question for you, but do you think that poses a real sort of problem for PR agencies? Do you think they're at some kind of inflection point now where they need to adjust, or they need to be more aligned with the sales elements, but more so than they used to be?
I think it could be aligned with it all.
Mm.
And I really do. I think, yes, it's important for them to understand that. Is to understand that the right messages from a PR perspective, so those good news stories, those things that really resonate, but also as well, how does that align to the marketing messaging? So I think to be a good PR agency, certainly that closeness to sales and those key elements, from internal PR sort of communications from big businesses, and how you might be pushing that out, but equally so making sure that that's aligned to the total communication strategy. I was talking to somebody just prior to this call who runs an internal communications company, yeah,
Mm-mm.
and we were talking about, and it was all born on a conversation I had last week about a business strategy, quite a high level business strategies and messaging company. And they say we do all this great work upstream about redefining the value proposition, and what do these businesses make a stand for? What do they really? What is it that their purpose is in what they do in their community? And he said, I hand over the baton to these people. And then he said it's left to the internal communications and the marketing department. He said it's not necessarily executed in the way that it's been born. So it's almost like you give these people your child to say, yeah, you can bring it up now, and then the child you get at the other end is not the one that you hoped it would be. And I think for effective use of PR, I think they need to be not only aligned to sales, but also the agencies or the marketing side of it as well. And I think that's, whether that's a change in consideration, whether that's something that might be new in that world, I don't know.
What it says to me is there's a need for generally more holistic thinking and more collaboration actually between both agencies, but also within companies in terms of, so departmental, you need to have completely flat structures for this to really work.
Absolutely. We used to do a lot of work for Brother,
Mm.
and the CMO for Brother, once a year, would call all his agencies together. Doesn't matter what you were in. He would call all his agencies, and he would outline the strategy for the next 12 months of the business. So you would have us all in there. So you would have digital performance, PR, us as account-based marketing sort of lead generation specialists. We're all in the same room, and we spent a whole day in the room working through the strategy and the disciplines and the targets that they were looking to achieve. And so we all walked out of that room at the end of that meeting, understanding what Brother's objectives were for the full 12 months, our roles that we played with it, but more importantly, we knew who each other were. So if we ever felt that we needed to communicate with each other, we could pick up the phone and just say, what are you doing on a PR perspective on that? What are you doing on a digital performance or display perspective on that, etc., etc. So I think the corporate business has a responsibility to to bring everybody together.
Hmm, that's really interesting. And to take a slightly different look now, do you think there is a role? It sounds like there is a role for agencies to be also dreaming up their own martech, their own marketing tools. And what opportunities do you think there are in that space? I mean, what gaps are you seeing where simply technology is just not quite right yet in terms of the stack, the martech stack?
I think there's some, yeah, I mean, probably need a whole new
That's a
podcast.
big one. It's a
We
big one.
probably need a
Yeah.
whole new podcast on that altogether.
Yeah.
To be honest, Miles. Yes, I think for agencies to have um, their own technology, we do at Ice Blue Sky. So we've got one application that we've built and we use around LinkedIn, and we also have a buyer engagement platform that we use. Um, And effectively, we have those things because it brings real points of difference in relation to what we do as an agency. So, for instance, when we talk about these things, we combine them in a very sort of holistic way, but the value proposition that they bring by those, because we know nobody else has got them. So it's not that we're trying to buy tech from outside, stack it up, combine it, but that's just tech that everyone else has got. We do that, and we do use applications that everyone else has got, but it's some of those slight degrees of difference when we bring that together. I think most certainly the biggest thing I think um, for me is how do you report on everything? And I think reporting there is a big need for more of a more finite, holistic reporting platform, which which combines everything that you're doing as a business in its interactivity, both from internal and external as well. Um, because when you know and you understand the engagement of anything that you would do, if you can report on it and measure it, you can act on it. And certainly that's something we've built our buyer engagement platform. We've also built another application on the back end of that, which sort of solves that. But it's really funny now we've built it and we've taken ourselves into the market and the clients that we're servicing. That has become that we've just sort of said, oh, by the way, we've built this as well. There's a lot of interest in that reporting side, and more people I talk to. Again, the call I came on before I came on to see you, or from an internal communication perspective, this guy was saying, well, that's a real big struggle. How do people effectively measure internal communications and the effectiveness of it? So I think reporting is a big thing.
It's always been a struggle for PR. I mean, if you go back sort of 15, even 10 years, it was all about the what we used to call the thud factor, which is basically the size of the cuttings file. And
Yes.
then I used to invent very sophisticated systems for putting a quality number on the coverage. In other words, was it achieving X, Y, and Z in terms of
Okay.
brand? Was it elevating the brand? What did it have
Yeah.
a nice photograph? All the things that we
Yeah.
were doing. Did it have the right messaging in it and that kind of thing? And so that went so far, but of course now it's the work you're doing it is all about it, you're actually talking about leads, various levels of warming up, I would think,
Mhm.
and sort of level of engagement according to what they're responding to, etc.
Mhm.
So it's much more granular and it's much closer to sales. This seems to be the key change.
Yeah, definitely. If you could give a sales individual and say, look, we've run this campaign and this is all the content that's been consumed across all the different businesses and granularize it by the targets. And then you can give salespeople effectively, and you can do it very effectively with AI. We're already doing it at the moment. It's what we call sales insights. Based on what you see, what should you be saying? And that's really what we're trying to do. And that's when I said to you, we're a little bit like the James Bond sometimes of marketing because I do feel like sometimes we're spies. We're just trying to get in and amongst the corridors and into the and to understand what people are really interested in and what they're looking at. You know, and Intent is doing a great job of that, although it doesn't granularize it so much into who the individuals are. And I think that's the challenge. You can see that a company's engaging with things, but then who are the people in that account that you really need to get to?
I was going to move very seamlessly to AI or Gen AI,
Yeah.
and ask the question: do agencies who want to thrive going forward need to understand the opportunities presented by Gen AI platforms and AI in general?
Yeah, there you go. There's another podcast in itself on that one.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably another quarter of an hour worth
Oh,
there.
yeah, we recorded a podcast on AI last week, so
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting. Or
yeah,
you can summarize that in about 1 minute.
yeah. We can. I think
Mm,
um, we need to be careful of the oversaturation of content
mm,
right now. Okay, and it's happened. It's not happening. It's happened. We only need to look at our own inbox. We only need to look at LinkedIn feeds. We only need to look at so many things. And so, what's going to happen to us as well? What's the human interaction with that? Well, the human interaction is that we're not stimulated by it anymore. We're not. It's not turning our heads. It's not effective. And we've all seen the whole fake news rubbish and the clickbaiting that we see on all the various social media sites and things like that, which everybody turns off with, and all the millions of
Well, and
ads.
in
And
traditional media as well.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Mm,
absolutely. I align it to what happened with direct mail in the 90s, when all of a sudden we could personalize things and put somebody's first name on, and maybe put their
mm,
logo on, and everybody went down that route. And then subsequently there was a whole surge of DM. And what did everybody do when it came through their mailbox? It's just threw it in the bin. And
mm,
my concern is that we need to create an authenticity. If we're going to use AI, which helps us scale, and allows us to create content at speed, what we need to focus on is the authenticity of that content. Is it right for the audience? Does it really, has it got that real strong message to that audience we want to reach? Otherwise, you're just going to get caught in the melee of what everyone else is trying to do. And I think my concern is that the effectiveness of content, whilst we can create it at light speed with relevancy, if it's not authentic and if it's not aligned to the values of the campaign or the messaging you're trying to do or the people you're trying to reach, people will see through it. I mean, you've only got to look at your own inbox. I get emails from people now. You'd think they come to Christmas Day dinner with me, and they never have. They think, yeah, I read this email, isn't it, from people who think they've been on holiday with me, because because they've scraped my LinkedIn. They might have looked at my face. I don't know where they get it all from. Well, I do know where they get it all from, um,
mm.
but as soon as I read it, I'm thinking, hang on, I don't know you, and you're talking to me as if we're the best of mates.
Yes, that feels like a almost invasive, doesn't it?
Go away. So
Mm,
there is a role for it, and it's massive, and it's still evolving, and not necessarily do we as people right now know all the answers.
mm,
I just think I said it on the podcast last week. A lot of people are looking right at AI. I think you've got to look left, and I think you've got to look at it very carefully, because it's there to help us, but ultimately we still want to engage with people. I actually think, a personal view, I think face to face is going to become so much more of a relevant communication, way of interacting with people. I think we're going to go full circle.
that's fascinating because, and you're saying that because basically people are on a quest for authenticity, which inevitably means drives you actually closer to face, as close as you can get, if not the real thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. Let the
Mm.
historians review back in the archives of this podcast in 10 years' time and see if I was right.
Well, I think you're spot on the authenticity thing, because I spend a lot of time looking at content and actually saying that was definitely created by AI. And I'm thinking, oh God, so I'm already seeing it. And I'm seeing it all over people's websites as well, which is so when I'm doing sort of content evaluations, I'm saying this bit of your site really shouldn't be written by AI because it's white papers or something really premium content. And you've outsourced that. You've outsourced brain at the wrong point.
There was an interesting conversation I had last week about bots, okay, sales bots.
Mm.
Um, and it said with the younger generation, are they more likely to engage with sales bots who are being authentic that they are sales bots, saying, "Hi, I'm a sales bot working for. My job here today purely is to just have a very straight, authentic conversation with you about your pain points and your needs around XYZ." And we had the conversation last week. Would people sooner interact with a bot knowing it's not a person than they would knowing if it was an SDR or an account executive following up?
I think as long as you come clean, I mean, as long as the bot comes clean, if you know what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah.
I'm with you on that. Again, I think it goes back to authenticity. I think if you say who you are and you say what you're there for,
Mm.
then you're already more than
But,
halfway there, aren't
But
you?
equally so, you might be more truthful with a bot than you would be a human because you're less scared. I don't know.
Yeah,
uh,
I've seen research which has said differently. In other words, they think it's bot. They're more prepared to lie. In a
maybe.
complaint scenario, they're more prepared
Yeah,
to make stuff up. So yeah, I think it depends what you're communicating on. But it's an interesting topic, as you say. It's one for an entire
yeah,
conversation,
definitely,
I think.
definitely.
Um, and so, going back a little bit to the agency side, is there a place for standalone content shops in your view? In other words, people that are writing content for the media, for websites, for CRM campaigns, for socials. Um, or do you think there's such a pressing need for integration that really these things need to be working together?
Yeah. Are you thinking of sort of like content lakes or data lakes or thing? Is that?
No, I was thinking about small agencies. I mean, to a certain extent, like ourselves, where our craft really is content, and we're now writing content for example, people's LinkedIn profiles. We're putting up thought leadership content based on briefs, etc. We're writing press releases, we're writing case studies for the websites, press releases for the media, etc. So we've always been producing content for a specific channel for a specific purpose with a particular message and all the rest of it. Does that really need to be now working alongside all the stuff you do, um, or at least in collaboration? That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where our worlds slightly collide, Miles,
Mm,
because we're doing LinkedIn writing and articles, and we're pushing those out there. Our sales engagement platform that we got, Tribe, we're putting articles on that, which is relevant to the buying groups. So we're using that as a vehicle to engage with buyers.
mm,
And sometimes we're taking feed from the client, so things that you might put together, for instance, but also as well, we're generating content ourselves. So we would be doing like a webinar or something like this for a client,
mm.
that we would be putting on our engagement platform, or we would be putting something on LinkedIn. So I do think there's that overlap between agencies like ours and PR who are creating these other articles to say, right, well, what is interest? What's going to capture the interest and the thoughts of those buyers? Because it's those buyers that, excuse me, that are consuming that information.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's it, and I think it's all about having the suite of different types of communication at different levels
Yeah,
according to where decision makers are in their decision making processes, I suppose,
definitely.
um, which is the way I always think about it. So, what is the one thing agencies that are serving B2B tech businesses need to change or offer, in your view, in 2025?
Oh, it's a big question, isn't it? I think I don't know whether I don't know whether they're going to do anything differently, because I think most people are doing adaptations of a theme. I mean, obviously, certainly in our world, tech is our sweet spot, and we're dealing with some of the biggest tech businesses, both direct to consumer and through channel as well. Um, I think I'm not necessarily saying that agencies should change, but I do think they should have a methodology around what they're doing. And now we never say I don't condone cookie cutter approaches. I don't. I hate that. But there should be that methodology in relation to how you are seeing the world, how you are undertaking your work, because I think that's important to communicate that with the people, the marketing people, the sales people, the PR people, the C-suite. Because at the end of the day, you are agencies are an extension of their own resource. And so you've got to have that alignment with them. So I would say, it comes back down to what I was saying earlier about really analyzing and strategizing and knowing what that methodology is. What is that? What is that strategy? What's your secret sauce as an agency? Because, that's what makes the world go round. We can't all be the same.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
I think agencies have to have those degrees of different. It's almost like marginal gain miles. It's a little bit like what's the 1 or 2% difference from your agency to the next person's agency to the next person's agency, and
Mm,
then and then it's for the buyer to understand the value of those differences and does that fit more or less into what their requirements are. I
mm,
think for the sanity of what we do, and this is anybody out there that's watching this podcast, really look at what you're creating by using AI, because we could end up killing our own industry if we just overly just produce. It'd be like flipping just this overflowing dam of content, and
yes.
I can just see that
Mm,
everybody's just going to be running for their hills.
yes, I think there's a danger because we're sort of moving into marketing automation in such a big way, and simultaneously Gen AI, etc., is maturing. So you just sort of put the two things together and off you go. And of course, yeah, what what you can do is just create an absolute monster.
Not just the written word, but that's visual as well. You
Mm.
look at some of the great AI tools, Midjourney. We use Midjourney and things, but it's you have to worry about how images are put together as well, and are we going to go down a certain stereotypical approach with imagery? I don't know.
No, well, that's really interesting. And I think probably the last one to look at is tech firms themselves, businesses that you're working with. Um, are are they struggling to close sales at the moment? And why do you think that's happening if it is in any sort of as a trend, as it were?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily so much people are struggling. I mean, if you're struggling to close stuff, then you've not got value. But I think what is catching people out is the amount of time that it's taking, um, the gestation period between early stage sales engagement and closing of business.
Used to talk about how many touch points was it, six
Yeah,
or seven, and it's now
yeah,
sort of 13 or more. Yeah,
even more than
yeah,
that. And that from an early stage sort of problem identification, solution exploration conversation, then all the way through to getting that sort of embedded and baked into the thinking of your target, and then when it comes to vendor consideration and how long that takes. So I think it's just become a longer process, and obviously the complexities, as we were saying earlier, it's about the amount of people that are now involved in that decision making process, and sometimes that can hinder the sale because all of a sudden somebody comes to the party late. They're not aware of what is being requested, and then they start putting things over the fence, and it slows the deal down. So sometimes that can get in the way.
yeah. You've got a
Um,
bit of inertia
of
building as a
course,
result of that. Yeah.
yeah. So I think being mindful of that is really important. If you're not closing deals, then you haven't got your pricing strategy right, maybe.
Haven't got your marketing right.
Well, maybe not your marketing, but
Yeah.
if you've not got your value prop or your business or your brand or your solution is not doing what it should do in comparison to the rest of the market, and that's the other thing. Things come into the market so left of field, very very quickly. You can catch people out.
Do you think a lot of markets are changing very rapidly? I mean, are people having to move their product sets on faster than they used to before? Is that one of the issues? Is about maintaining agility?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everybody needs to stay as sharp as they can.
Mm.
And you can get the best sales team in the world, but if you're flogging valve radios, you're never going to get anybody to buy them.
Mm.
But things are nimble, but things do change very rapidly. Um,
Yes.
and of course, you get disruptors coming to market as well. And that's part of the world we now live in. And we look at the explosion of entrepreneurship on the west coast of the States, Silicon Valley, down in Texas there, and but also as well, China is becoming a massive threat in that world as well.
Mm.
So watch this space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that heady note, in the midst of innovation and yes, and pivoting and and remaining agile, I think that's probably a good point to.
Yeah. Thank you, Miles. It's been really good to sort of just
No.
cover off a few of those things. And maybe as a result of this, there'll be a couple of points we think we should jump back on and have a purposeful just 20 minutes on
Yeah.
something. But be good to get the feedback from the listeners. But for everyone who's watched,
I will get it up onto YouTube. We'll have a quick review and get it up, and hopefully we'll get some reaction.
fantastic. Thank you, Miles.